Welcome, hello, and hi, my creative friends. Today we're checking out one very unique, very beautiful pencil, straight from Japan. Founded in 1913 to manufacture wood case, lead, and coloured pencils, comes a Japanese company with a reputation for excellence, innovation, and very original products, including today's pencil range. I give you the Tombow Irojiten Coloured Pencils. I should start off by apologising profusely to Japan and every Japanese-speaking person out there. Whatever I am saying when I'm trying to say Irojiten, I'm sure I'm getting it wrong. Today's pencil from Tombow is another one of these pencils from a brand that I really only knew about in passing as grey leads, and strangely, they're eraser pens, which I actually really love. That's a real shame because as soon as I've started looking into the colour range, let me just say they look amazing, particularly on the packaging side of things. But coolness aside, are they actually any good? Today we're going to throw our series of extensive tests at them to break the Tombow down to the nitty-gritty and answer that very question. First up, let's start by taking a closer look at the pencils themselves. This is the Tombow Irojiten No. 2 Woodland 30 pack of coloured pencils, and wow, other than being a heck of a mouthful, it's also a very different packaging experience. It's actually a series of 3 books inside a cardboard bookcase. If we jump over to the Tombow site, well, the American version anyway, we can see that Irojiten is comprised of 3 kits. Kit number 1, the Rainforest kit, number 2, which we have here, the Woodland kit, and number 3, the Seascape. I'm assuming, based upon the names they have, each kit is a specific colour range. Interestingly, for such a collectible kit, these pencils are also available singularly, which is an excellent sign they're intended for artists. We'll see, I guess. Back to our kit here, the number 2 Woodland kit. The packaging is amazing. It's designed very cleverly to look like a tiny little bookshelf with 3 pencil kits inside as books. This box and look is stunning. Genuinely so. The outside of our little bookcase has some simple branding and a lot of Japanese writing. If we turn it over, it has a small swatch as to what's in each of our 3 books. If we slide out our 3 books, oh look, they're all held together with elastic just like real books. What a wonderful little detail. Here they are, our 3 little books, pale tone, deep tone, and light greyish tone. It looks like there's also a little booklet here with all the swatches in each kit, which is a great little resource. When we open one of our books, if I slip the elastic off, did you notice that? They open from the right, just like Japanese books, and of course the Japanese read from right to left and not left to right. How lovely. Speaking of lovely, here are the pencils. White, glossy, and really elegant with very vibrant cores. Inside our book collection's lid, it looks like we also have information about the names of the pencils and more detail. Each of these kits is very beautiful and it has a colour range targeted to the book's title. Pale tone is lighter, deep tone is darker, and light grey is not surprisingly light greyish colours. These are beautiful kits, and I suspect owning these would make an effort to put your pencils back into them nicely. But the books have very small dividers, so if you're using these pencils in a professional sense, you may struggle to store them safely without them shaking free. The Irojiten are Tombow's most well-known coloured pencil, and as you can see, once we're past that amazing packaging, we're left with a very simple, very elegantly designed pencil. Sleek, smooth, and glossy. In fact, this white is so glossy, I'd actually call it an ultra gloss, as it's really throwing that light back at us. Texturally, it feels wonderful in your hand, with the cedar wood barrel making this feel like a nice tight grained pencil. The pencil is around 175 millimeters or 6.9 inches in length from tip to tail, and it's quite a pleasant sized pencil coming in at 7.7 millimeters in diameter. That vibrant wax-based core is a decent 3.2 millimeters in diameter. If we look from our tip along our glossy wooden barrel, we have a remarkably clean white until we hit the color code, followed by the Tombow dragonfly symbol and a small silver Tombow in elegant font. If we flip our pencil over, we have the pencil's color name, followed by the color code again, and a vibrant silver Irojiten across the large color swatch at the end. The color swatch has a rounded end which feels sleek and smooth, like it's been dipped in paint. These are beautiful pencils, and the packaging is one of the most fun package designs I've ever seen. It's a genuine pleasure to open these up and play with the pencils and of course this box. To be honest with you, everyone I've shown these to, which has been pretty much everyone who's visited my studio in the last few weeks, loves them and has gotten just as excited as I did when they see them. They are just very cool pencils. One of the things that should make sense to us with this kit is the meaning of the word that I keep butchering, irojiten. Irojiten is Japanese for dictionary of color, hence the book-like format of the packaging. These are all books of color, which is very clever. Looking at their site, it's an interesting color range they've chosen for these kits. Each kit has 30 pencils, which gives us 90 total in all 3 kits. At first glance, it looks like we have a relatively broad color range. However, if we look closely at the colors, they are all fairly similar with not a huge amount of browns and reds, and I feel like they're missing a lot of the lighter colors. I feel it's a color range for a purpose, but I'm not exactly sure what that is. I'm liking the look, I'm loving the feel, but now it's time to see if they're actually any good. Today, we're going to test this kit we have here and find out just how good these Tombow Irojitens are. The first test we're going to look at today is, of course, the saturation and vibrancy test. In this test, we take our scale and see how bright and saturated these pencils are at given weights. What we're looking for is a consistent and vibrant pencil that builds up the saturation as we build up our pressures. I've got an interesting color range in this kit, and with no whites and blacks, I was just going to pick 4 colors and see how they went across all of our tests. But let's do something a little bit different. The light grayish tone is a strange color range, so let's grab 2 of our lighter colors from that, and we'll test them instead of our white. So today's pencils are Volume 5 Deep Tone 2, Red D13 Terracotta, Green D17 Cactus Green. Volume 4 Pale Tones, Blue P19 Hyacinth Blue, Yellow P14 Straw Yellow. And from our black paper, from Volume 6 Light Greyish Tone, LG2 Cork, LG1 Fawn. With our saturation and vibrancy test, the way we're going to be doing this is by putting down pigment from the pencils at 5 different pressures. 25 gram, 50 gram, 100 gram, 200 gram, and 400 grams. So light to heavy. As the pressure builds up, our pencil should become more and more saturated. This scale is just from my kitchen, so we may have some numbers jump around a little. For any paper people out there, I'm just using basic 120 GSM white multimedia paper for these tests. Let's do some saturation and vibrancy testing. Starting with our 25 gram weight. The red looks very smooth and is very easy to put down at 25 grams. While it is quite saturated here, it's in a really soft way and quite light for what I'd expect with wax pencils. The green is similar in terms of saturation levels as the red, but again, we've got that lovely smooth laydown that makes these pencils look really luxurious. The blue is a touch lighter in color here at the 25 grams. While 25 grams isn't very much weight, it is quite light saturation wise. Now our yellow. Whew, I can barely see this at all. Yellow is generally a really light color, but that I think has to be the lightest 25 grams we've ever seen. Let's see what happens with the 50 grams. That red going down is quite a lovely color as reds go. I feel this is a nice smooth transition up in saturation and vibrancy, possibly more than 100% increase. The green is again very similar to the red in terms of increase in saturation and vibrancy, possibly not quite as much. The blue has made a lovely improvement in the saturation here at the 50 grams. I'd say we have a full doubling. Our yellow, however, is still basically invisible. I will say here though that these pencils are quite pleasant to use and very easy to control, which is great. Let's move into the 100 grams here. With our red, once again, we have a nice jump in saturation and brightness. Not a full doubling, but still it's very good. The green is very similar to our red here. The blue is starting to come more in line with the red and green saturation here and is becoming a lot more vibrant. That yellow is still super hard to see, but we're starting to get a little hint of yellow. Let's see what 200 grams of pressure does. The red starts us off with a nice increase in saturation and vibrancy. It looks like a doubling from the 100 grams. I'd say that the green has also had a good increase in saturation and vibrancy, but maybe a little bit less than the red. The blue has doubled and is matching the green in vibrancy quite well now. The yellow is, I guess, at least consistent. The saturation and vibrancy is climbing. It's just such a light pencil, it's tricky to tell by how much. Onto our 400 grams. This is our heaviest weight, so I'm expecting all our colors to be super vibrant here. Starting with red, we can see it's gotten a lot more saturated and vibrant here, and I'm noticing the texture is almost becoming creamy as it burnishes slightly. The green is similar with a really dense creamy blend, which is bringing out that saturation and vibrancy. The blue has also gotten much more saturated and vibrant. I definitely feel we've had a 100% increase here, and we've now got a lovely saturated blue. Lastly, our yellow. Well, there's no denying that it's the brightest it's been here, but in saying that, it's still a very light color even at this 400 gram weight. Let's check out how our two gray tones go on our black. First up is our cork, which is like a light browny sort of skin tone. The 25 gram weight, it's super light here, but on this black cardboard, very noticeable. The 50 gram weight feels like it's a nice doubling in saturation and vibrancy here. At the 100 gram weight, we don't have as much of an increase. It doesn't feel like a doubling of the 50 gram. Neither does the 200 grams actually. We're getting a nice color down, but it's not jumping as much as I'd like. The 400 grams looks good. Saturation and vibrancy wise, it has the same creamy burnished texture the other colors had. Let's check out our fawn, which looking at the swatch looks like a light pink skin tone. The 25 grams, 50 grams, 100 grams, 200 grams, and of course the 400 grams have gone down almost identical to the cork color, just a slightly different tone. And that was our saturation and vibrancy test. Really interesting results. For a wax-based pencil, we really haven't had a huge amount of pigment put down at the lightweight, and it's pretty hard to convince these pencils to put down more pigment at the heavier weights, which may suggest that these are harder pencils. Color-wise, they're okay. Looking at the swatches on these pencils, I must admit I was really expecting much more vibrancy, but they are overall very pleasant but fairly muted as colors go. Feel-wise, they're okay. A little bit more scratchy across this test, and I did notice they were a little bit difficult to control at the 400 gram weight, but not bad overall. I'm not sure what I was expecting using the other colors on the black cardboard other than our normal white. The fawn and cork have shown up better than that yellow, but as the colors aren't terribly bright, they aren't really that impressive. Anyway, let's give these pencils a grade for saturation and vibrancy. Using our scale of A to F, with S being superb, let's look at how these 6 colors performed. Because of how vibrant they were at the 400 gram mark and quite a good consistency across the board, I'm giving the Tombow a B- in saturation and vibrancy. They did quite well at the 400 grams, but really struggled at the lightest weights. Also, those colors, while okay, really aren't that vibrant. Our next test is, of course, the single pencil gradient. This is where we take all of our pencils and, as the name suggests, try to create a nice smooth gradient with each of them. Again, we're going to try and do these gradients on our scale, as it does add a little bit of a different element to this test. I think this time I'm going to drop that black cardboard and just do everything on our white. Our yellow is the lightest out of everything here, lighter than our fawn and cork, so there will be no real reason to use the black cardboard for these pencils. Anyway, let's go see what happens. Let's kick off this test with our red pencil, or really it's more of a rust color. We're starting nice and heavy and then pulling off that pressure as carefully as possible. The red isn't too bad. There is that same problem with the heavy weight. It takes a lot to get there, but once we're there, it graduates fairly well into the lighter end with a nice amount of a mid-range. The green is actually pretty similar to the red here. We've got a relatively smooth gradient from heavy through to mids into the lighter weights. The blue is okay. It drops quite quickly from our heavyweights to our lightweights, which skips over a lot of that mid area. This is probably because it does take so much effort to get up to that 400 grams. By the time you bring off that pressure, your hands are a bit shaky. The yellow is again crazy light. Like the blue, it misses most of that mid-range, dropping quickly into the super light weights. Our cork is coming down okay. It's very similar to the blue in how it's laying down. The mid-range struggles as we drop into that light end, but for some reason, I really like this color. The fawn is very similar, however, I feel like it's got a slightly greater mid-range than the cork did. These pencils are quite interesting. This gradient test shows very similar results to our saturation and vibrancy test, but just in a more nuanced way. The red and green were pretty good. Heavy, mid, and light end are all there, but the blue, fawn, and cork really drop very quickly through that mid-weight into the light end. That yellow, I think it's the same as the cork and the fawn, but it's so light, I'm struggling to see it, so I'm not sure. Feel-wise, I feel like I could have made these gradients a lot smoother if the 400-gram weight was easy to achieve. I don't just do these tests once. I do them 3 to 5 times depending on if I think I've done a good job or not. And every time I tested these pencils, they came out the same. It's difficult to bring off a consistent amount of pressure to achieve that smooth gradient every time. Let's give our gradients a result. For the Tombow Irojiten, I'm going to give it a good solid B-. That puts them here. The red and green were decent, but the remaining colours missed a bit too much in the mid-weights. It's time for the blending test. Blending is one of the most important things we need a good coloured pencil to be able to do. A good blend, or the ability to do a good blend, is the sign of an excellent pencil. For this test, I'm taking our 4 primary colours, red to green and blue to yellow, and we're going to blend them as smoothly as possible. We're going to be paying special attention to what happens in the middle of these gradients where the colours meet. What I'm looking for is a seamless merging of the 2 colours and how they mix together. Let's have a look, shall we? Starting with our red as per usual, I think this red is my favourite Tombow pencil so far. As I pull off the pressure, it's graduating down with this smooth drop off from heavy to light. As our green goes up to meet that red, where they meet, we're starting to see some blending happening. There's a tone of brown coming through as our pigments mix here. Let's try the blue and yellow now. I got my pencil caught there a little bit and I seem to be using a lot of pencil here in that blue gradient. Apart from the sharp edges, it's a relatively smooth gradient down on the blue. Starting on that yellow, up we go to meet that blue. There's not a lot going on here, I think due to the lack of saturation on that yellow color. If we have a really close look, there is a tiny little bit of green coming through, but because that yellow is so light, it's really difficult to see. And that was our blending test. Overall, it was fairly underwhelming. I had a suspicion our blue and yellow were going to perform fairly poorly due to how light that yellow colour was. Obviously, vibrancy in a pigment means it's easier to see when blending with another colour, particularly with tests like these, and that yellow was never going to do very well. But I'm surprised we didn't get more green coming through. The red and green pencils are fairly similar colours in vibrancy and how the pencils have performed, so in theory, they should have had a decent blend. But no such luck. There is a bit of colour coming through in a brownish colour, but there's very little blending overall. For a wax-based pencil, they haven't done as well as I would have hoped. It's felt like the colours are laying on top of each other, and for what little mixing there is, it's fairly poor. So let's give our Tombow a score for the blending. Because of such a poor showing, I'm afraid I'm going to have to give them a D. And that puts them on our scoreboard right about here. In this test, we compare the colour the pencil puts down to the colour displayed on the barrel swatch. Pretty much the only way we know what a pencil's colour is based upon what we see on the barrel. Accuracy is important to us, particularly if we don't know the pencils very well. The Tombow have quite nicely sized swatches, which is great, so it should be quite easy for us to check. For this test, I'm simply bringing in the pencil barrel and putting it next to the gradient we created earlier. We're then just going to compare them by eye to see how accurate the colours are. To start us off in this test, we're bringing in our red pencil. The pigment put down there is a darker, more rust colour than the barrel colour, which looks to be a richer, more vibrant red. The green is a similar sort of situation. The colours on the barrel feels a few shades darker and richer than the pigment put down. The blue's not too bad. The pigment on the paper is more washed out than the pencil barrel, but it's not terrible. I'd say the yellow is the closest of our pencils so far, although the pigment again is more washed out than the barrel swatch. The cork is surprisingly good, although the barrel is a bit browner than the pigment that it's put down. And lastly, the fawn pigment is a bit darker than the barrel swatch. So that was the colour accuracy test, and while this is a quick and simple test, it's pretty obvious fairly quickly that the Tombow hasn't done overly well. While several of the colours put down have been lighter, all of them across the board lack a lot of that vibrancy we have in the swatches. Such a shame, as the swatch colours are all beautiful. I would have loved to see the pencils put down the colours we see on the barrel. For our middling colour accuracy, I'm going to give the Tombows a score here of a C+. I would have loved to give a higher score here, but looking at how lovely the swatches are and comparing it to our pigments, a C+ is a good mark for them. Alrighty folks, it's time for my favorite test, the break factor. How much pressure do we need to put on these pencils before they break? To me, when you look at a break point in a pencil, it's all about consistency. Does the brand care enough to have a good consistent mix in their core to get a comparable snapping point every single time? These pencils have felt fairly hard throughout these tests, so I'm expecting a fairly hard break point here, but being wax, I could be completely wrong. Let's go and test them out. To make this test as consistent as possible across all the pencils we're going to review, as usual, I've set up a couple of controls. I'm going to sharpen each pencil to a point. I'm then going to dull them slightly by drawing 3 lines at pressure. Basically, this will make sure we don't have a fine point that will break easily. I'm then going to be using a 45-degree square to get a consistent angle of pressure to make sure it's consistent across all the pencils we test. Makes sense? Let's go break some leads. Starting with our red pencil, as I always do, let's take that tip off. 1, 2, 3, and setting up our angle. The pencil is quite a comfortable pencil to use overall, but I have noticed I've needed to put a lot of pressure to get the best out of it, especially at those heavy weights. Up we go, 500 grams, 600, 700, 800, 9, 10, 11, 12, and snap! We've broken at 1,470 grams. That is the highest break point we've ever had of any pencil ever. Very impressive. So, will our green be as strong? Our tip is off and we're lining up and the pressure starts. 200 grams, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and bang! 1,850 grams, another breakpoint record. These pencils are setting out to be the hardest pencils we've ever seen. Onto our blue. The tip is off and let's set up that angle. Okay, here we go. Are we going to get another record? Let's see. The weight is going up. 6, 7, 8, 9, 1 kilo and snap! 1,418 grams, a very high result and very close to our red. These are such interesting and strong pencils. Okay, onto our yellow. I always have this idea that lighter colors are weaker than darker, and that's often the case for whites, but I'm not sure about this yellow. Our tip is off and the angle is on, and the weight is starting. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1 kilo, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 1,821 grams. Without that green pencil, this would have been the hardest pencil we've ever seen. Let's look at our cork. The cork and fawn have performed very similar through all these tests, so I'm curious as to what happens with our last two. The tip is off and our angle is done and the weight is rising. 600 grams, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and snap! 1,498 grams. Right, onto our fawn. The pencil is set up and let's start bringing up our weight. Here we go, it's rising. 600 grams, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 2 kilograms, and snap! 2,245 grams. That is the highest weight we've ever had by far. I wasn't expecting that last pencil. The fawn and the cork have been so similar to each other across our tests, I was really expecting them to break around the same weight. But no, there's more than 700 grams difference, which in pencil terms is a lot. These pencils have felt like hard pencils throughout these tests, so again, the high break point is not a huge surprise. I just really wasn't expecting it to be that high. Throughout these tests, these pencils haven't been overly saturated, which I guess now makes sense, as usually harder cores put down less pigment. That said, because they are so hard, what they have given us is pretty impressive. If we average all our scores, we get an average breakpoint of 1,717 grams. If we look at them on our big scale, there's a massive difference between the next highest breakpoint, being the Winsor & Newton, at just over a kilogram, and the Tombow. 700 grams between the next highest pencil is a substantial difference. Looking at the lowest breakpoint for the Tombows, it's 1,418 in the blue, and of course 2,245 on the fawn for the highest. Several of these pencils have been fairly consistent, with the red, blue, and cork being very close break-wise, But with an 827 gram difference between the highest and the lowest breakpoint, it's overall fairly poor consistency, which is a lot of what this test is about. Let's give our Tombows a score for our break factor. I think because of the big difference between the high and the low, we're going to have to give them a really solid B. I'd love these to be more consistent on their breakpoints, but for the vibrancy they do get at that hardness, they're pretty impressive. That puts them on our graph right here. It's time for our final test. Do these pencils spark joy or do they cause despair? This test is purely based on my personal opinion, which I've formed across this whole video. Do the Tombow Irojiten spark joy? Look, feel, and vibe. I absolutely love them. The Tombow are sweet, so cute, and just really fun to have. I've had these pencils to review for about 6 weeks now, and in that time, I've bought these kits twice for different people as gifts. They aren't artists, but they love art, and they both absolutely love these kits. The kits are so well put together and are really just very cool. The pencil design is simple and elegant, like what you would expect a Japanese pencil to be, and that white gloss is really enjoyable in your hand. Looks-wise, they're just lovely. In terms of color range, they're not the greatest. There are some interesting colors in each of these kits, and the idea of separating things into grey and pale tones is very interesting, but nothing seems to have the vibrancy you assume it will from the end swatches. And when we look at the swatches online for the other two kits, there's a lot of similar colors, and I really don't think enough variety, which is a bit of a shame. Performance-wise, they haven't done super well. They have performed much like what I'd consider coloring pencils to do so, not artist pencils. But even then, they may actually be too hard a pencil for that. They gradient okay and are relatively consistent depending on the pencil, but saturation, vibrancy, and most importantly, the blending is very poor. They are super hard, which does make them very tough. And while for that breakpoint, they actually have put down a lot of pigment, but it's not what I would consider enough for usage in a real art piece. If you're looking for very light-handed, lightly pigmented pencils, then these may be for you. But anyone who wants the full range of color represented will need to use an awfully large amount of pressure to get the kind of saturation I'd consider useful. And that's going to be quite a hard slog on your wrist. This pencil test has me so conflicted. It sounds like I think they're trash. I don't. I really do love the look and the vibe of them. And since I bought these pencils for this review, I've actually bought myself another one of these kits. And these pencils are currently my go-to pencil for gifts. Not only are they really reasonably priced, being $3.95 Australian for a singular pencil, with the kit starting even more reasonably at $38.44 Australian each, but they do just bring joy when people open them. And did I mention they're just very cool? So while they might not have performed the way that I'd hoped, they still made me pretty happy. And I think that's the key with the Tombow. You just buy them because you want them. So for today, I'm going to say yes. Yes, these pencils spark joy, albeit just because they're so cool. For today's joy factor, I'm giving the Tombow a good solid B. The Tombow are one of those interesting pencils that do have some flaws, but there are so many things that just make you want them. And that puts them on our scale right here, a very comfortable and very cool result. Well, that's it. All our tests are done, and all that's left to work out is our final score. How we do that is by taking all the results we've received across all of our tests and aggregating them with a final mark. For our final overall score for the Tombow pencils, they receive a, drumroll, C+. Nice work, Tombow. If we put them on our big scale, they go right in here. Finally, what we do here is we make a decision as to how we class these pencils. Are they categorized as student, hobbyist, or professional? Interestingly, with these pencils, they have scored very similar to previous student pencils we've reviewed, but actually lack several elements that often make up student pencils, including the shape, and these pencils are just so glossy, children may struggle to hold them. They have also felt very close to what I'd call coloring pencils, albeit very hard coloring pencils. So I guess today, even with that lack of saturation, I think I'm going to class them as hobbyists. And that puts them right in here, you guessed it, with a number of other excellent coloring pencils. Well, that is it for today. I really hope you've enjoyed looking at these absolutely beautiful and really fun, really cool pencils. I'm going to butcher that name one more time, the Tombow Irojiten. Have you used them and how did you find them? Have you bought them for someone or hope that someone buys them for you? They are very fun and really so beautiful. If you want to buy yourself a set, I've stuck a link below. As always, clicking through that link helps this channel a lot. Right, next time we're looking at another strange design in pencil, but this time it's a different shape. The triangular and very black edition from Faber-Castell. I actually haven't played with these at all yet and I'm very excited to see how they go. But until then, if you want more stuff, have a little look at the links below and we have a very active Discord that you can sign up for. If you want to come chat, come hang out on Twitch with us. I'm there most days. That's it for now. Have a brilliant day, everyone. I'll talk to you all very soon. Bye.